This program on investing under regulation crowdfunding is not investment advice.
Rising with the crowd, power unbound, change makers lead where hope is found. Superpowers for good, shaping the fate. Investors and dreamers open the gate. Supercross stands loud, proud and true, building tomorrow for me and you.
Would you like to live in a world where cancer is as treatable as the flu? That's the world I want to live in. And today's guest is working to make that happen in an almost universal way. It's so exciting. Stick around. You don't want to miss this conversation. Plus, let me add, you can invest in this as well. My guest today is Dr. Nicole Paulk, and she is the CEO and founder of Siren Biotechnology. I'm your host, Devin Thorpe. Welcome to the Super Crowd Presents the Superpowers for Good show. Now, Nicole, thank you so much for joining me. I'm just thrilled to have you. This is so exciting. Yeah, when I listen to you talk about this and read about what you're doing, it makes me feel almost so warm and fuzzy about cancer that I almost want to get it. Because I think, oh yeah, Nicole's got me.
Who's ever said that?
So tell us a little bit about what you're doing and what it means.
Absolutely. So Siren is actually a company that was spun out of my lab. So before this, I was actually a professor of virology at UCSF here in San Francisco, so the University of California, San Francisco. And this project kind of spun out of something in my lab that we were actually working on during the peak of COVID, which was a very interesting time to be a virology professor, by the way, during a viral pandemic. But we were working on this project to try to basically develop enabling technologies that would make good viruses, happy viruses, viruses that don't make you sick, viruses that we use to do a type of medicine called gene therapy, where you use a virus to deliver basically a genomic medicine to patients. We were trying to develop a way to use that in a cancer setting for the first time. So kind of prior to Siren existing and prior to that project starting in my lab, we had only ever really used this particular class of viruses to treat genetic disorders in children, but it had never been used in a cancer setting before. And so we got really excited about kind of the power and the potential of using this in a cancer setting, and then decided back in 2020 to spin it out and actually start a company. And I actually did the wackadoodle thing, and I actually decided to resign from my faculty position and go be the founder and CEO, just because I was so excited about the data and what we had so far. And now here we are 5 years later, and we're like single-digit months away from being in a clinical trial. So it's been a pretty transformative last couple of years.
That is wild. It sounds to me like this is coming together so fast. I remember, and it's a poor comparison, but 30 years ago, I attended a conference. Well, 35 years ago. It ages me, but it doesn't. 35 years ago, I attended a conference about diabetes treatments. And at the time, they were talking about pumps that would connect to real-time monitoring, and that would manage your blood sugar for you.
Yeah.
35 years later, we're still in the early stages of that implementation. There isn't one on the market yet that fully responds to your food yet, right? So things take so long. How have you been able to move so quickly on this?
I think part of this was we had a sneaky advantage, right? We got to kind of start from within academia, and we had all of the funding and the infrastructure and all of that from being at such a kind of premier institution like UCSF is here in San Francisco, right? The kind of trifecta of major universities is right here in San Francisco. You've got UCSF, UC Berkeley, and Stanford. You've just got these three universities that are just really pushing each other to be at really kind of the foundational edge, the bleeding edge, the cutting edge, pick your favorite word, of all of these different scientific disciplines. And so we're all kind of pushing each other to really be as amazing as possible. And so we had this head start in academia to really kind of get get the concept behind this project started. What that would end up, fast forward, becoming Siren. We didn't think when we started this project that we were necessarily going to found a company. We were just trying to really work on something transformational for patients. And then fast forward, all of these, years later, and we started to be like, gosh, man, this data is really starting to look good. And I got a joint appointment actually in the cancer center, which may not sound weird to your viewers, but it was actually quite weird for me. Because the particular virus that we work on to do gene therapy, like I said, had never been used in a cancer setting before. So to get like a joint appointment over in the cancer center and be giving a seminar to all these MD colleagues, right, who treat patients, they were like, what is going on? Who is this gal and what is this data? And then all of a sudden, here we were and we had all this data and we were presenting at Tumor Board, and our clinical colleagues were like, you should really start considering, gearing up to run a clinical trial. Like this data is really impressive. And so that kind of gave us the impetus to get started. And then we were fortunate enough to have, really, really fantastic investors into our seed, into our Series A, and money makes science happen. And so with enough funding behind us, we were really able to kind of push forward pretty fast and bring us to today.
Yeah. Now I want to get a little into the weeds, and it's scary when a lay person like me tries to wander into the weeds.
Oh, you're good.
But what you're doing has broad potential, but that is so rare for cancer treatments. Help us understand what's different about your approach that could allow this to have broad, almost universal application.
Yeah. So in cancer therapies, there's really kind of two camps. You can either be a very targeted drug, or you can be very broad acting. And both of them are good. We need both. We need both on the market. We need both for patients. They're just different. So the very, very targeted ones go after, right? Many of your viewers may have heard of, genetic mutations that you might get in cancer, right? So they're usually targeting some type of genetic mutation that has happened in the tumor cells. And so it won't work on patients who don't have that very, very specific genetic mutation. And it would work on patients who do. But that tends to be a very limited number of patients. If you're talking about, brain cancer, for example, that's the space that we're in. There might only be, of the, say 30,000 patients a year in the United States who are getting a brain cancer, there might only be several hundred or several thousand who might be eligible for a very targeted drug, but the rest of those patients aren't eligible. And so actually the vast majority of patients would probably stand to benefit from a more broad acting drug that is not specific to a mutation, but works on kind of any cancer type. And we fall into that camp. We're a broad acting one. And so what we do is basically take a virus, not the kinds that make you sick, but ones that are very good at getting inside of you. There's this misconception that all viruses are bad, right? Actually, the vast majority of viruses that have ever been discovered on planet Earth are not bad for you. We only ever study about the 30 or 40 that make us sick, but you're crawling in viruses, right? They're everywhere. Most of them are okay. There's just a few that actually make us quite sick, and those are the ones that we treat, and those are the ones that we vaccinate against, these types of things. But the vast majority of viruses don't make you sick, but they're still very good at getting inside of you. And so they're very engineerable, and so you can kind of treat them like a little FedEx delivery truck, and you can remove anything that you want that they already have, and you can put in whatever you'd like, for example, a genetic medicine or something to treat a cancer tumor, these types of things. And they will faithfully deliver these anywhere you want in the body. So you can be like, go to the lung and deliver it to the lung, or go to the bladder and deliver it to the bladder. In our case, we want it to express and deliver things into the brain, into brain tumors. And so you can engineer these viruses to go where you want in the body and deliver that particular kind of genetic medicine or payload. In our case, we're delivering these anti-tumor drugs called cytokines. And you can get this really, really strong expression that happens inside these tumors. And again, it's not targeted to a specific mutation, so it could work in potentially any tumor type. And so we can deliver these, get this broad-acting anti-tumor ability from these viruses, and potentially start reducing the tumor burden in patients. And so we've got really nice data showing that in animals, and now we're getting like single-digit months away from being into a clinical trial where we can start actually demonstrating this hopefully in humans for the first time.
Wow! And it seems to me that I've read in preparing for our conversation that your drug could at least theoretically work on some very difficult to treat, things that traditionally are inoperable and then often fatal. Tell us about the application there.
Yeah, so our first indication, the first particular cancer type that we're going after, is a form of brain cancer that happens in both adults and children, but we're going after the adult version first. And it's basically recurrent, so a cancer that has come back. So it's recurrent high-grade gliomas. So this is a specific type of tumor that happens in the brain that's of the worst type. It's high grade, so this is things like stage 3 and stage 4. Those are the ones that have like really started to get gnarly. They've started to, they've started to spread. They've started to do things we don't want, and those ones are unfortunately really quite fatal for patients. So most of these patients, once they have recurred and it's happened again, right? Most of these patients unfortunately pass away within about 6 months, and there's no standard of care. There's no drugs. Very often we can't operate on them. Very often we can't irradiate them and give them radiation therapy. Very often they've already become resistant to drugs from their first tumor, and so they're not eligible for chemotherapy. And so all of a sudden you get this diagnosis and there's just kind of nothing. And it's just really, really frustrating. And so there's this huge unmet medical need. And we started to see data that looked really promising in this tumor. And we felt like this was a huge opportunity to do something for the cancer community that might not otherwise get done, right? There are kind of, this sounds weird to say, but there are kind of darling cancers, which are the cancers that everybody goes after, right? The cancers that really pull on your heartstrings, right? These are things like breast cancer, right? No one wants their mom or their daughter or their sister or their best friend to get a cancer, right? That can be disfiguring and these types of things. But brain cancer is a cancer that very often kind of gets left behind. It's unfortunate given how fatal it is. And so we started to see data that looked really promising in this space. And so we felt like kind of almost a moral obligation that we've got to go after this cancer where there's just this huge unmet need.
This is so exciting to think about, because nearly a third of people die of cancer. We all know someone who has. My father did. And so and we all know people who've had cancer. Yeah. And so it's, my mother-in-law died in cancer, so half of my parents and in-laws died of cancer. That's pretty remarkable right there. But yeah, we all have those connections. Wow. Did that lead you to feel like maybe this is something you could finance using a crowdfunding approach instead of a venture capital approach? Because there in San Francisco, you probably met a venture capitalist or two.
Oh yeah, we've got a bunch of them.
Yeah. So what brings you to crowdfunding?
So we actually had a wonderfully successful seed and Series A financing with all the classic big name marquee VCs, groups like Founders Fund and Lux Capital, right? So the biggest and the best. The reason we actually opened a crowdfunding round was not because we actually needed the funds. It was much more kind of the interesting opportunity to bring patients and their families and folks who've been touched by cancer onto our cap table, right? So normally in the therapeutic space, crowdfunding is just something that doesn't happen. GoFundMes for like patients who just experienced a diagnosis are a thing that happens, but crowdfunding to actually allow people to come in and invest into a company is just not something that's typically done in kind of the biotechnology and the therapeutic drug development space. It's just kind of a door that is closed to people. And very often when you are a therapeutics company, the first time you actually start interacting with patients is very, very late in the process. It's actually not when people think. People think that as like, a CEO that I get to interact with the patients on our clinical trial. No, right? There's kind of like a firewall for privacy reasons. So I will know when someone is getting infused in our clinical trial, but I don't get to know who it is. And I don't know their name and I don't know any of the specifics about them other than that they were eligible for our drug and the trial, kind of criteria, but I don't get to know them for privacy reasons. And so there's this kind of data firewall. And so what happens is like you're this drug development company and you're building this drug, right? And you're going through a phase 1 clinical trial, and then a phase 2, and then a phase 3, right? And it's almost kind of until the very end when you're getting ready to maybe think like, I think this drug might get approved. Maybe we'll be on the market in the next 12 months, and this will be a drug that folks can go get prescribed from their doctor. Then you kind of queue up a bunch of patients and have almost like an A/B testing session where you're like, hey, we're going to show you some potential marketing copy that we might use to advertise this drug. Let us know which copy resonates with you. And it's like, right, it's like so kind of out of touch, and it's so late in the process. And I really became enamored with the idea of bringing patients into the conversation that we're having much, much earlier, right? Before we even run our first clinical trial, and give them a say in things like, what should our next program be? Like, you have a say in this. Like, let's talk about it. So bringing patients and their families and allowing folks who've maybe lost someone to cancer, who want to do something kind of in tribute for that friend or that family member, allowing them to have a voice, and just kind of really building together almost a community. I feel like also in 2025, there's kind of this moment that I think everyone can kind of feel in the air, that things are changing, things are different. And I think it's a new moment to kind of build a company in a much more transparent way, where you involve your community and whoever it is that you're building for, in our case, for cancer patients, right? Bringing those folks actually onto our cap table and into the conversations that we're having and into the strategy meetings we're having, and really kind of allowing that voice to come earlier in the process so that they can have a say in, right, what's our next program and the program after that, and how should we think about these types of things. So I just became kind of enamored with the idea of bringing patients' voices into the conversation.
That's fantastic. Now, I do want to point out, SuperCrowd, that on the screen now you can see s4g.biz/siren. That's a direct link to the WeFunder page where Nicole has got her campaign. So check it out. This is an opportunity for all of us to invest. Wow, wouldn't it be fun to participate in such a pivotal cancer treatment? Well, listen, Nicole, SuperCrowd, we've got to take a quick break.
No worries.
We're here with Nicole Paulk, Dr. Nicole Paulk. She is the CEO and founder of Siren Biotechnology, and we've been talking about her amazing cancer treatment that she's developing. And we're going to take a pause. When we come back, we're going to talk to her about her superpower. So stick around. You don't want to miss this.
Download a free copy of How to Make Money with Impact Crowdfunding, the book Sarah Hanks describes as
a fantastic overview, not just of crowdfunding investing, but of investing in general.
Andrew Savikas raved,
"This book offers unparalleled insights for anyone looking to make a difference."
Scan the QR code to get your copy. SuperCrowd 25, where innovation meets impact.
18 hours of live content, 5 platforms, 1 global audience.
Join the largest event for regulated investment crowdfunding. Live pitches, expert panels, real change.
August 21st and 22nd.
Scan the code or visit thesupercrowd25.com to register free today.
Struggling to raise capital for your business? Unlock the power of the crowd with AI. My free guide, Crowdfunding Made Simple, walks you through every step to success. Get funded smarter, faster. Scan the QR code now for your free download.
Welcome back. I am so excited. We're here today on the SuperCrowd Presents Superpowers for Good with Nicole Paulk. She is the CEO and founder of Siren Biotechnologies, and she's got a new treatment that could be dramatic in the advancement of cancer treatments. But we're going to shift gears now to talk to her about her superpower. So stick around. You don't want to miss this. Nicole, you are doing amazing things, and I have a sense that just having garnered a spot at UCSF as a professor is a big deal.
Yeah.
And now to look at what you're doing, bigger deal. You are a big deal. What is your superpower?
I feel like, particularly in kind of this moment, like you said, right? The academic journey is a long and brutal one, right? I was an undergrad for 5 years, a PhD for 5 years, a postdoctoral fellow for 5 years. Then I was an instructor for 1 year, and then I was a professor for 5, right? So you start looking at this and you're like, you start doing the math and you're like, gosh, this is starting to be almost 20 years, right? It's the vast majority of my adult life was all geared towards basically becoming a professor and being an academician and being in the ivory tower and doing research. And so it was, I think my superpower is the willingness to get to what you thought was your dream, but being willing to be like, you know what? I actually think I'm going to do this other thing and I'm going to resign from what I thought was my dream job. And in some ways was to go do an even crazier thing, which is to go be the CEO of a cancer company, right? They're like the joke that I think all of us tell, right? There are 2 hard things: right? When you're like joking with your friends, right, over, at a barbecue or something in the summer, and you're razzing one of your friends, and you're like, well, I mean, it's not as hard as what, right? You say two things. It's not like we're doing rocket science, but what's the other thing that you joke? It's not like I'm trying to cure brain cancer, right? We joke about it because it just feels like this impossible thing, right? There's rocket science and there's curing brain cancer. It's considered like these two impossible things that we all joke about. And yet I decided that I was going to resign from being in academia and actually go try to do one of those two things. I was going to go try to cure brain cancer. So I feel like my superpower is just kind of being willing to, jump off the cliff without a parachute and be like, we're going to figure it out. We're going to make it work.
That is amazing. And it is an extraordinary superpower. I wonder if you can think of another time in your life where you made that kind of leap, that kind of surprising pivot. What do you think? Is there another example?
Oh, gosh. I feel like, right, my whole life revolves around science, right? I'm a scientist. I feel like scientifically, there's a lot of pressure to kind of walk a well-trodden path and to think through like, all right, this is what the textbook tells me, so it must be true. So I will find things in support of that. And you kind of walk this well-trodden path. And anytime in science that you try to maybe pivot away from conventional knowledge, right? You discover something that was never known, right? Something that has never been discovered before. And the first time you presented it at, your department seminar or at a big conference or at a big seminar or at a big meeting, it's very common to actually get met with a lot of folks being like, ooh, I don't know about that. You're changing the dogma. You're changing what we think. You're changing what we know. We would have to rewrite the textbooks if this was true. And that makes folks very uncomfortable. I think folks, even who aren't scientists, could imagine how that's true, right? If you tell someone that 1 + 1 = 3 instead of 2, they'd be like, my priors tell me that 1 + 1 = 2. So 1 + 1 = 3 would be a big leap. So I feel like every time I've published one of our papers where we were pushing the boundaries of what was known, we had a very big discovery the first year that I was actually a professor, where we had one of those moments. We discovered something that was not known previously that was, kind of going to require us to change what was written in the textbooks about the particular virus that, fast forward, we actually ended up using in Siren. We didn't know it at the time, but we made this kind of fundamental discovery about the biology of this virus that would have meant that everything we knew before about it might have been kind of wrong in this one particular kind of biochemical setting. And we published this data, and oh gosh, people were furious in the beginning. They didn't know what to think of it because it was different than what we knew. And then like fast forward now, 5 or 6 years later, there's whole sessions on it at conferences because now everybody's reproduced it and it's just well known.
That's amazing. That's amazing. What's a quick tip you could share with us for being more like you?
Oh gosh. You've got to be, oh gosh, how would other people describe me? Probably exceptionally well-read, very charismatic and loud, willing to kind of talk to anyone, and trying not to. One thing I think you learn as a professor and as a CEO, if you want to connect with people, if you want them to trust you, if you want them to kind of really resonate with your story, is you have to talk to them at where they are. Right? So if someone, very often they'll hear like, oh, I was a professor, or I'm a CEO of a biotech company, and they assume, oh gosh, you must be so smart, I couldn't possibly talk with you. And I'm like, don't worry. Like, where are you at? What do you know? And I'll talk with you and meet you where you are, and make sure that the analogies that I'm using resonate with you and these types of things. I think whatever you're doing, always try to talk to people at where they are and meet them where they are. And that will allow them to kind of resonate with your story, and hopefully will allow you to do better in whatever it is that you do in your normal life.
Excellent. As we wrap up now, Nicole, can you share some guidance on learning more about Siren Biotechnology, connecting with you, et cetera?
So we've got a couple of resources for folks. We've got both our campaign page that we have on WeFunder, and we also have our website, which actually has really great little videos and little schematics and ways for folks to kind of see if they're like, how does this actually work? this virus that she was talking about. There's like little diagrams that kind of walk you through like how the virus gets delivered, how it enters a tumor cell, how it actually kills the tumor cell, how it prevents the tumors from coming back. So there's a lot of great explainers that use like no science crazy jargon, like very, very approachable language for folks to kind of get a sense for how these things actually work. And I've actually given a number of really generalist talks meant for a generalist audience that you can find on our YouTube page. So Siren, our company, Siren Biotechnology, has a YouTube page, and there's some great talks that we've given that are, again, meant for a generalist audience. So are meant to be very, very approachable for people to kind of give you a sense for kind of how to think about this technology and what we're working on.
That's amazing. Amazing. Well, let me point out too, SuperCrowd folks, that s4g.biz/siren is a short link that'll take you directly to the WeFunder page, s4g.biz/siren. I want to encourage you all to check this out. What an extraordinary opportunity to invest alongside some of the smartest VCs in Silicon Valley and support. What an amazing treatment. So, Nicole, thank you so much for being with us. We wish you every success in your efforts to eradicate cancer.
Exactly. Don't we all?
All righty.
Let's
Let's do some good.